Okay, good morning, everybody. July 30th, 2024 at 11 a.m. This is our zoning bylaw review working group meeting. As you can see on the screen, our agenda includes items such as the continued review of Article 10. So we'll be finalizing our discussion about the potential amendments that we've been working on for the past 2 or 3 meetings. And then we want to talk about the town meeting schedule and some of the draft amendment items that we'll be bringing to town meeting. So I just wanted to make note of the fact that Bob Ritchie does have a time constraint today. He's only got 30 minutes, so I want to just jump right into the conversation about the non-conforming section so that we can give him plenty of time to help us just finalize the review. As I mentioned in my email over the weekend, that we left off our conversation at the last meeting on the restoration, abandonment, and non-use section. And so I guess we'll just open it up for conversation. Folks, we last left off on the abandonment and reestablishment section. And so therefore we can just, take off where we left off. So I will pass the baton over to Richie and Mitchell and anyone who has any comments about this section.
Not really. I think this has always been an issue that right from the beginning, the reestablishment of abandoned uses and structures. We tried to be sensitive to the expressed wishes of the group when we drafted this, and we just want to make sure that number one, it does what you want to do, and it says what you want to do in a way that's legal and readable. So I guess the question is, how do you wish to proceed?
I would just add that most of this language is from your existing bylaw.
Right. So I guess maybe I'm the problem child in the group, but living and breathing and zoning 24/7 these days, I am still vastly perplexed by the flexibility that is offered here, because, on your front page, you're telling people it's the purpose of the bylaw to discourage the perpetuity of non-conforming uses and structures. And then you're saying to people, well, you're abandoned, but you can ask the zoning board for permission to reestablish or to change to a new non-conforming use. And what I would just kind of generally caution, I guess the vote is whatever it's going to be. But, in some of my research, I'm finding that you cannot improperly bar a use that's allowed by special permit. So, you can be putting yourself in a tough circumstance. And whereas with a variance, which I think is most typically the benchmark that most communities use, variances do allow rules to be adjusted to achieve a public purpose or interest of zoning. So I guess I'm just still very concerned about the fact that you're telling people that they could be abandoned or they could have demolished, and now they have the possibility to come ask for a special permit, where I personally feel it would be a variance.
So again, I just want to repeat, this is your language in your bylaw. We are not telling you anything. Okay.
Right.
So if you don't like your language in your bylaw, it's up to you to tell us what you want to change.
Right.
Yeah, let me just jump in and say that I think it's entirely consistent to say that you're discouraging non-conforming uses and prohibiting them. And I think somewhere between discouraging them and permitting and prohibiting them, it's useful to equip the town to make adjustments that only future circumstances can support. So this is, I believe, a reasonable effort to find that sweet spot between something that, even though it is discouraged, it ought not to be absolutely prohibited if it meets these high standards that are short, perhaps, of the standards required for a variance. So, yes, indeed, as Bob says, this is stuff we sort of carried forward, but we carried it forward with a sense of it makes sense to us. So, I think abandonment is pretty well understood what that means in state law, and the point that Bob and I have to try to hammer away, the state law doesn't put the town in a straitjacket with what it wants to do with its zoning bylaw, and if it is the wish to take some circumstances where abandonment has occurred and to permit their reestablishment, carefully considered, makes a lot of sense to me. But as Bob said, if you want to cut that out, you're free to do so.
Okay, and now as a point of clarification, I'm assuming, unless I'm misassuming, that we are no longer at the point in time where we are strictly maintaining the same language intent of the bylaw, but that we are looking to tweak or make proper changes. Is that correct?
Yeah,
That's
I think you pointed out, Noreen, that carrying it forward doesn't mean that it's written in stone. And as we're looking at this, I think I would assume that we're at a place where you can make such tweaks as you think appropriate.
I think there's one piece of crucial evidence that should be here that isn't in the list of things that the board shall consider if the Zoning Board of Appeals wants to allow the use to continue. The problem with abandoned property is that they're a blight on the neighborhood. They're usually not maintained. They're running downhill. The lot becomes filled with junk. The building's falling apart. You're even allowing it to be demolished without reconstruction. And it would be the care of that property during the period of abandonment should be considered. This person in the Bahamas might have arranged for the property to be maintained or not. And I don't know what language you would put in or what's acceptable, but certainly the interim care during the period of abandonment, now reestablishment, ought to be what the real evidence is. Who took care of that place in the meantime?
I think you've raised an interesting possible addition to the factors where the behaviors of the property owner in the maintenance and care of the property and the extent to which it has deteriorated through their own neglect may be a factor that you might wish to consider adding to this list.
But I think the basic point is if we were to change the intent of this section, it would be a substantial change that we would want to not only think thoroughly through, but also identify clearly for town meeting, because this would be a change to past practice.
Well, we've already labeled a couple of things as we go through as being new. So that's not a problem. We realize that we're making changes. There are new things. And the reason I bring this up about interim maintenance, I'm not sure that's the right language. There was a house on the corner, nearly on the corner of 151 and 24A that sat for years. The owner had built it in defiance really of the zoning and just assumed that eventually the town would give in and let him use the property the way he wanted to for commercial use. The town never did, and eventually he had to fix the property up. But for a dozen or more years, a deteriorating property was sitting there and nothing was done about it. And it would be good to have language in this that would prevent that.
Yeah, I don't know if maintenance of a property, I mean, so typically when you look at abandonment, somebody's not obviously maintaining anything if something's abandoned, right?
That's not obvious. Your example
No.
was the person is absent, gone, it's in the Bahamas. So what's happening with that property in the meantime is what's the problem to the neighbors and to their property values because of the treatment of this property. It's not where he is, it's what's happening to the property that actually matters.
Right.
One comment is that, and I don't know if Falmouth has anything in its general bylaws about property maintenance, but most towns that do, that language is in their general bylaws, not in their zoning bylaws, because it's much easier to enforce when it's in their general bylaws.
Do we have any such thing in Falmouth?
No. There's also a consideration under the building code where if you have a building permit and you stop work, or I can't remember how long it is, but it's not too long a time, the building commissioner can revoke the building permit. And we actually had a situation here a few years ago where a building permit was issued. The building was half up. The builder walked away. He came back a couple of years later and the building commissioner would not reinstate the building permit, so he could not finish. He had no choice but to take it down.
Well, Frank, what do you think of putting language into this A through G things, something about the interim maintenance?
I think it's worth thinking about. Absolutely. I'm pleased to hear that idea.
Well, now's the time to think.
Well, Bob and I could come up with as soon as some draft language and that we would put into the next version of this, and you could take a look at it at the next meeting and see if that meets your intent.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. But the issue of abandonment is definitely one of the more difficult ones to deal with, but there should be a provision in there for reinstatement under appropriate circumstances to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
I also had a suggestion under number 4, which is the next section, unsafe structures. And I was suggesting to add at the end of the last sentence. It says the Board of Appeals may extend the 1-year time limit by the grant of a special permit. And I was recommending to add if requested prior to the expiration of the 1-year period. Because I think otherwise you're going to have an issue where the building commissioner is issuing enforcement and a homeowner can essentially potentially bounce one board or commission against another where, they would look at the building commissioner and say, well, we don't have to comply because we can go to the zoning board for relief. Whereas perhaps you want to be a little more strict about a timeline for that. Because certainly if you have an unsafe structure, you certainly don't want to give someone piles of time to remedy that. Because presumably if you're talking about, say a garage that's imminently going to fall over, if there's kids in the neighborhood or whatnot, that can be a draw to them and can create a nuisance.
Maureen, the only question I had about that is, I guess, making the assumption that the board would not extend it unless it had been requested within that 1-year period of time.
Yeah, I just wondered if it should be clarified. So,
well, the only other circumstance that we'd have to deal with is if the board took it on itself without such a request to do so, which I can't imagine such a circumstance.
I'd like to let the building commissioner deal with this.
So on to our last section, 10.6. And again, just being sensitive for Bob Ritchie's time. Is there anything in 10.6 that we should cover?
The text that's in red is language that Bob and I put together to address that issue. And we just hope that does what the board, the group wants to do.
So just as long as everyone can see the screen, showing that first section of red text, that is 10.6A, number 2.
And I think we've used the word analogous rather than similar to. I think we discussed that, and there is a needed comma in the 4th line from the top after the word applications. So.
Seeing any objections to this new text? Okay. It appears that 10.6B in exemptions is all black, therefore indicating it was carried forward from our previous non-conforming section. And we have come to the end, folks.
Good.
So any other, with that, I think what we should do is just, circle back to the top. Is there anything that we missed during our conversations? And the reason I say all this is because it's sort of a lead into the next topic that we want to discuss, or at least go over, is that, town meeting is quickly approaching. And we want to make sure that we have these things wrapped up if they're ready for our public hearings that we need to hold. So I guess this is the last call for any comments related to the non-conforming section or any edits that you might suggest. Okay, I'm seeing no movement to the microphones. That's indicating that no one's got anything else. So, I see movement. Is this Mr. Mitchell?
Just related to this, the work group, and particularly Charlotte, in the past had asked if we could put together some kind of small quote unquote report about what's changing here from the existing for town meetings consideration, what the substantive changes are. And I just wanted to mention that I've started working on that. So I've done part of it, and I'll continue working on it over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. And related to that, the material that goes to the town meeting members, how will we have been fortunate in working from a document that's red highlights pop out the things that are changed and different that we really need to focus on. Will that be true for the material that goes to town meeting members? Will there be some visual way for them to identify new or changed parts?
Well, we know, as you can see in front of you, we will have a draft of all of the red lines, which will be what you've all agreed to in the last few meetings.
Right.
As well as accepted track changes that would show the document as it would look like if adopted. So you'd have both of those. And so the red line document would show what's new and what's existing language.
Thank you. The AG caught us up on that, and I hate to be caught on the same hook twice.
And for clarity, Bob, you are also putting together, I'm assuming, some sort of memo form that would indicate where the substantive changes exist within this, or do I have that incorrect?
Yeah, that's what I just mentioned to Charlotte and all of you, that I've already started working on that. So.
Right.
How do you, is there some kind of format you want me to, is this like a memo to town meeting from the planning board, or just a, quote unquote, a report to town meeting on article such and such non-conforming? Is this, if there's some, and you don't have to answer it now, but if there's some particular heading or format you want me to use, let me know.
The second one you recommended sounded good, but we'll be thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last question where we're wrapping this up. There was a reference under 240 10.1B about variances, and I noticed that has been crossed out. So I guess what I'm wondering is there any reference within the bylaw about variances?
Oh,
What do you mean more specifically?
So
In
where
this
you-
section?
Right, so where you remove the word variance here and a description, how are you providing to anybody what a variance would be or when it would be applicable?
Noreen, could you tell me what section you are looking at?
So I'm looking at 240 10.1B.
10.41, 240, 10.1, 2.4.
240, 10.1B3.
Yeah,
B3.
Yep.
it was B3 and now it's crossed out, but now as far as I know, that was the only reference to a variance within the bylaw. And so what I'm wondering is, for the vast quantity of people who are not familiar with variances, which we find very regularly before the zoning board, people will use the word variance interchangeably with special permit. And it's understandable for the lay person, they're not going to know or understand the difference. But by removing any reference to variance, you have provided no explanation to somebody about when a variance may or may not be necessary or how one could or should apply for such. I don't know that that's available anywhere else within the bylaw.
So I don't, I mean, it's available in the variance section of the bylaw. You have a whole section on variances in the bylaw.
Okay,
And that section that you just referenced being eliminated was something that was original in our original draft, but the work group took it out.
okay, so it's removing from this section, but it's staying in its own.
It's staying in its,
Okay,
variance, which is,
Okay.
shows up in the table of contents. So if somebody's looking for the word
Okay.
variance,
okay,
they would find it in the table of contents.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure in addition to that, as you can see up on the screen, in a conversation, we decided to remove that 10.1B.
Yes, I
item.
have it fully crossed out. Yeah.
But in reliance on this section, as you can see in 10.2B, number 1, my memory was that we felt like this language should stay that references variance, and the other language from 10.1B3 be deleted. That's my memory.
That's a good memory, Jed. It's right.
Okay, so with that, why don't we,
But
unless there's
so
any
now,
other,
is that correct? Oh, wait a minute, other than a single two-family. Nope, that's fine. Okay, we're good.
so unless there's any other questions, I'm going to transition back over to the agenda and just make note of the fact that we're going to be talking about the town meeting schedule. So, and this directly relates to the deliverables that we just went through with Mitchell and Richie. So currently our town meeting schedule looks like this. The warrant closes at the end of August. I've, tentatively drafted a opening for a public hearing late August. And so we would need to have these deliverables in hand relatively soon in order to make sure that we're comfortable with the language. We want to bring them forward as articles, et cetera, et cetera. And the draft list that I have for town meeting this year includes this Article 10, this non-conforming section. It also includes home occupation, which I think we've dealt with at the working group level several times. We've agreed to final language. So I think we're in a good spot there. I do have a list of technical amendments that we may want to entertain moving forward with at the November timeframe. And then there's also the possibility of potentially doing amendments to the mixed residential and commercial overlay district. So it's a lot on our plates, but I do have confidence that we can get there, which means we should probably talk about, considering all of that, we should probably talk about our next meeting date being sooner than later, but being respectful of Richie and Mitchell's ability to get us those deliverables so that we can review the final Article 10. And so I will transition to that conversation now, and we can, cut the meeting significantly short than what it would have normally lasted. So I guess the question to you, Bob Mitchell, is how soon do you think you can get us those deliverables, be it the track changes, the clean version, and the memo that you've described, so that we can have our next meeting ideally mid-August?
So a couple of things. The track change, the final version, if quote unquote final, which would be the next version, and if you want to tweak it again, you can, but quote unquote, the final version is more important at this moment than the memo to town meeting, because town meeting is not till November. So I don't need to get that done in the next week or two.
Right.
But could you remind me, does the planning board want to have its public hearing before the warrant closes, or does it have it after the warrant closes?
It's after.
Okay. So the main goal right now is to have a quote unquote final draft that can go into the warrant that will be signed on August 30th.
Yeah, I mean, technically the select board executes the warrant on September 9th, so we have a little bit of time there.
Oh, I see it. Okay. All right. Well, so I can get, the rest of this week is totally booked for me, but next week I have more openings. So my goal would be to get this back to you by Thursday, August 8th.
Okay.
And then if the work group wants to schedule a meeting sometime in August, they would have time to look at the quote final version to see if there's any final tweaks to the final version before the end of the month.
That's great. So why don't we do this? Is there a possibility that folks' calendars are open on August 14th? Not to put too much pressure on you, Bob, but can we tentatively schedule a working group meeting on August 14th?
Do you want to do that, Jed? Or if you're just having us review language, should we just review it and then send it in? Or do you want to book it in case we need to talk?
That's what I'm thinking. We'll pencil it in. And if we don't need it, if we decide that we want to do a different route, that's easy to just cancel.
Okay. That date is fine for me.
Bob Ritchie, is he still on or did he leave?
He's gone, I think.
Oh, he's gone. Okay. Well, I'll have to double check with Bob.
That's fine. He said he was going to try to join by phone, but I'm not sure if he was successful to do that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
is that Bob Ritchie?
Yeah, it is. I'm driving, but I can still talk to you. Now, the 14th is clear on my calendar.
Okay, great. No, yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
11 o'clock?
Yeah.
11 a.m.
Okay, confirmed with me.
Okay.
Terrific. Any other comments for the good of the group, or are we good to adjourn?
All set.
Done.
Thank you, everybody, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, thanks
Bye
a
now.
lot. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.